Okay, so today we are going to be working on comparing actually both nouns and adjectives, even though that doesn't say anything about nouns. But let's talk about first nouns. And so when we talk about nouns, we talk about a person, a place, or a thing. That right here, that should be pretty familiar to a person, a place, or a thing. So, what is it? A person could be a boy, a place could be Chicago, Detroit, Hawaii. A thing could be a ball, it could be a cat. So, nouns are persons, places, or things. Um, when we compare, when we compare two things, so let's just say that we've got two boys, right? So you would say that Jimmy is taller than, that's a bad age, than Sam. So what we did here is that because because we are comparing two things, we're comparing Jimmy and we're comparing Sam, I'm going to be adding er onto that adjective. So Jimmy is taller than Sam. Now, if I'm going to add a third person, so when I'm talking about more than two people, I have to do something a little different. Well, and I just made that a screen change, but when we're talking about more than two, we're going to add est. So if I said Jimmy, oh, I need my new pen, so hold on, let's go to here, and let's say if I said Jimmy is the tallest of all three boys. Now I'm talking about something different. I am talking about est on the end of it because now I've got more than two. If I'm comparing two objects, you add er. If I'm comparing more than two, I'm going to add est. And you do this naturally all the time. This is something that um, that you do in your basic language and speaking. So this really should come naturally to you. Look at two examples. The first one says, Mary is shorter than Kai. So in this case, I've got Kai and I've got Mary. So because I have two people that I am comparing, I'm just adding er on the end of it. Shorter, taller, uh, bigger, um, all of those things. You add an er. Carrie, for the next sentence, it says Carrie is the tallest of the girls in the class. We're assuming when we say this that there's going to be more than two. So because we assume that there's more than two, it gets the est on the end of it. So that's the first part of this. Really, this is just you're comparing two different nouns, and if it's two, you add er. If it's more than two, est. Pretty simple. Okay, so now we also have adjectives that can have more than one syllable or more than two syllables, um, and also end in a y. And actually, it should be two syllables, not more than two, just two syllables that have two syllables and end in y. So, for example, the word happy has two syllables. Happy has two syllables, and it ends in a y. What happens? Well, for all words, that y becomes an I in both. And then you just add your er or your est. So happy becomes happier, and happiest, happy becomes happiest. for when you're talking about more than two, and happier for two items. So Tim is happier than Sean. Great. Two people, happier. Uh, Jalen is the happiest of the whole class. That's everybody. Um, the car is the fastest on the road. That's more than two. The red car is faster than the blue car. So really, I mean, it's just you're sticking to the same things. It's just that when you know that you've got that Y ending in the end, it turns into an I. Happier, happiest. Let's take a look using those two rules at this example. So we're going to start with the word friendly. So we've got the word friendly. Friendly. It has two syllables and it ends in a Y. So that means that Y is going to turn to an I, and it'll either be friendlier or friendliest, depending on whether or not we are talking about two things. And I'm going to put an M for more than two things. So Tran is friendlier than Bill. Why does it have an IER on the end of it? Well, because it is two people. And friendly had a Y, so that I right there became, the Y became an I. The next example is Sally is the friendliest on the trip. Remember, this is assuming that there's a whole bunch of people on the trip, so it's more than two. And because it's more than two, we add the EST. That Y turns to an I again, friendliest. So it really follows the same rule, and it's pretty easy, I think. There's one other thing that I want to teach you, and that is about when you have adjectives that have more than one syllable. Let's take a look at that. Okay, so for adjectives that have three or more syllables, this should say right here, this is a little mistake. Right here, it should say add more or most in front of the adjective. So let's take a look at an example. Let's take a look at the word. Let's see here. Let's look at the adjective expensive. Expensive. There are three syllables. There are three syllables in this word. Three syllables. So when it has three syllables, if you are comparing two things, you're going to say more expensive. Oh, for example, how would I say this? I would say that maybe the drink, um, the drink is more expensive than the hot dog. I've got a hot dog and I've got a drink. I'm comparing two things. However, if I were going to say the drink is the most expensive item on the menu, then what we are saying is that out of all of the things on the menu, it's the most expensive. So that's when you use more versus most. It has to do with the syllables. If it has three or more syllables, then you're going to be using more for two things and most for more than two things. pretty easy. Let's just look at 2-sentence examples. So let's look at the word confusing. I just want to do another one. Confusing, confusing, confusing. So there's 3 syllables. So if I was going to say the science test was more confusing than the reading test. I've got 2 things, and I use more. However, if I say the science test was the most confusing in the, let's see, of the day, that means all of the things of the day, all the things. Of all the things in the day, it was the most confusing. All right, well, that's a quick tutorial on how to use comparative adjectives that compare. And we're going to do a little bit more work on our own. All right, good luck. Study hard.